You're most welcome to another episode of The Mine of Truth, and we shall be diving right into understanding the inspiration of the Bible. And what are we looking at? We're looking at the credibility of the author. We are looking at the source of the information. We are looking at the mechanism by which the men that did pen down these words received the information that they did receive. And as we dive right into the discussion, allow me to introduce the team that is with me today, and we are joined by Bridget Joan Owanije. Welcome. Mr. Mutesa Sira Moses, sir, you are most welcome, and Nantaza Jovia, you're also most welcome. We would like to go right into, many books have been written, and authors always have an intent and the source of the information that they do give. And as we look at the Bible, it has a tendency, just like any other book, that when you read the Bible, something happens to you, something does change there deep within. Who is the author, or who the author of the Bible is, and what makes the author of the Bible different from any other author of the book?
Well, when we look at the Bible, you actually discover that it is a book of books. It is a book that was written by many authors, ideally. And it was written over a very wide period, and over 1600 years. And it was written by people of different profession and different careers. And there must be someone who was guiding all these minds to come up with something consistent. And as we are going to look into it, we shall actually see that it was something supernatural.
Yes.
Something just beyond human intelligence that was able to guide all these minds to come up with something that was consistent over that wide period of time. And something that still makes sense, and something that still beat today's science in our generation. Yet it was written over 2,000 years ago.
Yeah. I would like us to refer to a document written by one writer named Samuel Katongole. In this article titled Inspired, this is what he has to say. And I just want us to just listen to the words in here. He says that the availability of varieties of literature today, not as in the past, becomes very evident. And to all, especially who have learned to read and write, myriads of publications are sent out per year and call to your attention of the readers that they intend to instill certain values and virtues, certain principles and ways of life in which the mind of the readers, in which the mind of the readers, they are meant to transform the reader. Now, what we look at here is that the Bible should also follow a certain pattern. That is something like that. There are things that have been set in the Bible. When you look at things maybe like principle, you do realize that there are some things that are in the Bible that we may not, that explain the ways of life that we do have today. And one other thing I would want us to also look at is who is behind the men that write the Bible, and of whom do they speak?
Looking at what he has spoken about from the very start, we find out that the Bible is a written word of God, and that the men who write these words are actually inspired by the Holy Spirit or by God himself. It is written there in the Bible, that the Bible is written by inspiration from God. And if you go further into the details of the Bible, there are some writers that speak and say that they were called in spirit, or they were settled somewhere, and the spirit the spirit came upon them, and then they wrote whatever they wrote. And that to me is a signal to any believing human being.
True.
That there's a power superior to the writing of these words.
Yes, and when you do read from the book of Numbers in the Bible, chapter 23, I do believe, in verses 19, it says, God is not a man that he should lie, neither the son of man that he should repent. Hath he said, and shall he not do it? Or hath he spoken, and shall he not make it good? More than any other author, we have not seen an author that comes out to be as credible as this. I mean, somebody who gives an introduction to who he is and he says, I do not lie. Why am I saying this? Is because he says he's not man that he should lie, meaning it is common for man to lie, and God does not lie. He says that has he spoken and he shall not do it, meaning it's common for man to speak at one point and he just doesn't do it. And has he spoken and he shall not make it good? Question is, has he said something to be good and it has not gone ahead to be good? So God is giving credibility as the author of the Bible, and he's saying that you can rely on me because I do not lie. And somewhere in Isaiah, possibly you will find him talk about his word not returning void unto him. When it is spoken, it goes out and it does fulfill. Now, I want us to investigate and look at what are those things in the Bible, okay, that would really look at, that would not have a logical explanation as far as maybe men are concerned, okay, but the Bible has something to say about them. What are those points where we could begin and see the evidence that the Bible is just not a book written by any other author?
We've seen that God does not lie. Now, the Bible talks about many things that human mind cannot explain. Neither science can't explain. Now, us not understanding certain things does not necessarily mean that God has lied. Now, when we read Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 5, it says, as thou knowest not what is the way of the Spirit, know how the bones do grow in the womb of her that with the child. Even so, thou knowest not the works of God who maketh them all. Now, the scripture was trying to refer to nature. Now, there are many mysteries in nature that human mind cannot explain. But anyway, they happen. I mean, really, the mother cannot figure out how the cells grow and they multiply into hands and then nails form and then the brain form. Now, that's a mystery. Now, well, we cannot explain that, but anyway, at the end of the 9 months, the child come out. So it's the same thing with the Bible. There are many mysteries the Bible talks about that we cannot explain. I mean, that human mind cannot really explain scientifically. Now, for example, the Bible talks about creation. And of course, we all know that science has come up with certain theories trying to explain the origin of man. Now, for example, we have a theory of evolution. We also have the Big Bang theory. Now, they're all theories that try to explain the origin of man. And the Bible is very clear about the origin of man. Like, in the beginning, God created the earth in 6 days. I mean, the Bible just gives it so brief. Now, you really cannot explain it much more than that with the human mind. I mean, that's a mystery that the Bible talks about. It's real. I mean, you can see it. But that doesn't mean that maybe God lied or not. It's a mystery. And the Bible just plainly talks about that. It does not give a lot of explanation, but it just plainly says that.
Okay, so you have spoken about the mysteries, and I would like us to going just far away from maybe creation, okay? Because creation is one of those things that, can I say, determines the beginning of whatever we see for the human race. What are some of those mysteries we could look at and they are really inexplainable, but yet the Bible has given explicit. Now, apart from creation, creation can never be explained about maybe how God spoke and things just came into existence out of nothing. But that is the account of creation, and it's the most credible. Evolution and the Big Bang all have a point of origin which is already with the things that are in existence. They will say a gas, but you realize that it was there. And the Bible can explain gases, and it can say where it all came from, but evolution and Big Bang may not. Actually, Big Bang cannot explain where the atoms came from. So what are some of those mysteries that are in existence today, but the natural world and these other theories do not have, and the Bible can defend them and their way of life?
Looking at the Bible, you come to realize that the Bible speaks about things that have happened,
Okay.
which we as humans don't have proof about. But yet the Bible is there to defend itself on these points.
Okay.
For example, the entrance of sin into the world. When God created the world, as we've seen from the story of creation, nothing in the world was sinful.
Okay.
Everything was pure. Everything was clean. He did not place anything wrong in whatever he created. But where then did the whole story of sin start from? How did sin come to enter into a pure world that God had created? Looking at that, and then also how did this sin actually enter into Satan? Like how did Lucifer, who was a mighty angel, second to Christ himself, how did he get sin in him? That we cannot explain, we cannot fathom. But the thing is, the Bible defends itself in explaining that. Then also you can look at the incarnation of Jesus Christ, of the Son of God coming to live with us, to dwell with us in flesh, like a human being. That no man can explain. But it happened, we cannot deny that, because the Lord speaks about it. It's spoken about right from the Old Testament into the New. So you cannot deny that it happened. If you really believe in the Bible, you cannot deny that that happened. Yes.
Wow, that's excellent. Moses, what are some of the mysteries that we would look at and defended by the Bible? What other mysteries are there that might add to what we just had?
I might briefly add on her point. Well, today we may wonder why we have all the suffering that we have today. I mean, the diseases, the suffering, loss of our loved ones, a lot of things happening. I mean, everyone wonders, where did all this come from? And that's what she tried to hint on as sin, the entrance of sin. And today we look at things like marriage. Well, we just wonder how things came up like that. I mean, this revealed itself in all the natural world. I mean, the crops, they have that tendency of male and female. The animals, I mean, that's a mystery. But anyway, the Bible explains this right at the beginning. God designed that. So there are really a lot of mysteries in the natural world that men
cannot fathom and explain. Okay, further looking at the mysteries, and Moses and Bridget have given us the beginning of a couple of the mysteries. Now, before we leave that, let's fully exhaust the other mysteries that would be vital to the human race, okay? And also the Bible does have evidence for.
Maybe
Yes.
we can look at a mystery like the regeneration.
Okay.
That is how a human being can overcome sin. After we have known that sin exists in the world today, why is it that some people out there can actually live a life that is free of sin? What happens in them? And we come to notice that most of them incur this when they come to meet Christ. Everyone tells a testimony and tells you, when I met Christ, my life changed.
Yes.
And this happened. And in their story, there's a change from doing whatever wrong they were doing into doing something good. And they can't just go back to the wrong they were doing. They cannot go back to the vomiters. That explains that there's something, or there's a superior power that actually brings them out of that sin. Then we could also look at the mystery of resurrection. When Christ came on earth and then he died, the story that we've all heard about. He died and he was buried, and then he comes out of the grave and he's all alive like nothing ever happened to him. Really? I don't think there's a human mind that can explain that, because death we as humans cannot actually explain what happened. We cannot explain what happens to people when they die. So to me, that is a mystery that we cannot fathom as human beings.
And the mysteries kind of point to impossibilities that occur to humanity. Yes, Moses.
Actually, when you talked about resurrection, I just remember that life itself is a mystery. Now today, we have professors who have got advanced knowledge on a certain elements of the body. Now, for example, have just a whole professor, maybe just for the brain, and have a whole professor maybe for the lungs and something like that. But it seems life remains a mystery because now it is amazing that even when you have 1 million professors now around a dead body, now they can't just bring that back to life. You talk about the mystery of death, something like that. Now, for example, well, sometimes we think we are alive because of oxygen, but actually we discover you can put oxygen, like you can get an anybody and you
expose it to oxygen and yes.
And it does not breathe. Nelson Mandela, he died while on oxygen. I mean, he had the whole oxygen he could ever need it, but anyway, he died. So really, you discover that life is a mystery. I mean, you wonder what really makes us life. What makes life? It's really not oxygen, maybe not what. But then the Bible explains that, in Genesis, the Bible explains that when God formed the body from the soil, God breathed the breath of life. And Ecclesiastes tells us that when one dies, the body goes back to the soil, and then the breath goes back to God, the one who gave it. So that itself is a mystery, which science cannot explain.
And that kind of puts us to impossibilities that occur to humanity. Yeah, things that are impossible for humanity. And we can investigate a few of the impossibilities that man cannot do. There are things that man cannot do. And
thinking about restoration of life, he can also not create life.
That is also.
We have seen in movies, and maybe some of you have seen physically, me I haven't, robots. People have struggled so much to create all kinds of robots, but no one has been able to operate that robot without something behind it. They usually have it connected to power, or I don't know. There must be a computer behind that robot for it to function. But if man can breathe life into that robot, then we'll say there's no impossibility in man. But the fact that they cannot make a robot function on its own gives us an impression that there are things that are impossible to human nature. And because they are impossible to human nature, there must be someone who can actually do what? Make them happen. And that leaves us with nothing but a belief in God.
Look at the growth, the way things grow. I don't think that we human beings can make someone grow. Like, even if it comes to animals, like when a calf is born, there and there it can start walking, which is a different story to human beings. That when they are born, they just can't start walking there and then. We have a stage that, and it's not us that do it. We only just see the baby crawling, and they're like, oh, the baby is crawling. And then we're like, he's touching things, he's touching things that, but we have nothing that to do about that. So it happens mysterious.
It's interesting how that baby cannot also understand how it feels like it should now stretch its hand.
It should look for the breast side.
So there is a lot about impossibilities of man that even I myself cannot bring on table. But then we can speak about the fact that we cannot explain how a man and a woman get attracted to one another. You cannot explain that. People meet in the plane and there's a spark that no one can understand.
No one has seen that spark, but it's there. Yeah.
Today they go into biology, chemistry, because they have seen the chemicals are reacting on the table in their labs, and they think that's the same thing that happens to man.
To man.
It's not. I don't believe so, because there's no color change when they come to meet one another.
Oh yeah.
There's no color change.
The atmosphere
so
is the same.
It's chemistry or biology. Whatever is there, it's a mystery.
Just like
It's eternity.
Human beings, we can't know everything. Because even if he was so wise, like Noah was one of the wisest men, but still we can't get into everything. We just have to watch everything mysteriously. Like that.
Yeah, now those are the impossibilities that do occur.
Maybe just one more.
Yes, please.
No man can actually tell the future. We can't sit here today and know what's going to happen to us tomorrow, can we? We cannot. And to us, that is also an impossibility. Whereas God, in His Word, everything has been told from Genesis to the end.
Even if we try to predict the future, like some people say, bad stuff happens. So you can say that I'm going to travel tomorrow, but then you die tonight. And people are like, but he said, like you predicted what is going to happen tomorrow, like the next day, but then God mysteriously makes something.
And then there is just one interesting mystery to human nature that seems to be an impossibility, though people today claim they can explain it. When you go to bed and then you wake up and you tell someone that I dreamt, do you really understand how that came in mind? Today, science today has tried to explain that most times we dream because of what we have done during the day or what we've spoken during the day. And so that is what comes up in our sleep. But sometimes you actually dream something that you have not actually expressed during the day. And you and I can, that's one thing that I've not even had evidence about. So there's just a lot about man that is impossible and only one person can do that.
And only one person can do that. And actually, when you look at the impossibilities that occur to man, when I would double back, for example, us failing to, say, explain things like how man is made anew, the Bible has a perfect record of Enoch. And it says that Enoch walked with God for about 300 years, and then he was taken. He was no more because God had taken him. The ability of Enoch walking with God for 300 years is actually an impossibility to humanity unless somebody else has done an intervention. And it was not out because Enoch lives for 365 years in total. But somehow the record has that for 300 years after the first 65, he walks with God. And that shows you that whoever is testifying of Enoch sees a difference between the 300 years later and the 65 years before. Okay? So I would say, yes, there are extremely a million impossibilities. There are principles of life that we see today. Okay? And things that we do apply in our daily living today. For example, diet. Let's begin at diet. Principles of eating and principles in a way of dietary life. Yes.
Maybe just go before you go to the diet. There's something interesting about the story of Paul.
Yes.
Paul gets converted along his way to Damascus. But to today, you and I cannot really tell what exactly transpired in the heart of Paul at that moment. Remember, Paul was someone who was so against the workers of God. He was very, very biased about them, and he actually used to kill them. Now, today, finding someone who is a murderer, you put them in prison, but even when you get them out, they are very willing to murder. There's nothing that has changed about them. But what transpired in Paul's time in such a short time, whatever transpired in his mind or his heart at such a short moment, is what is a mystery. That we cannot deny the fact that there is something that helps us to overcome sin once we believe in it.
Wow, that is actually impressive looking at the life of Paul. You do realize that Paul makes almost like a 180-degree turn in his life. And it is decisive. Same zeal, same energy. But something changed in him. And when you really look at it, that is coincidental with the mystery of regeneration. How somebody comes from extremely bad to extremely good and efficient and inspirational to as many people, and extremely influential, leading people to make some similar turnarounds, not just in their personal lives, but in the lives of whoever is affected to them.
And looking at Paul in particular, Paul was one man who actually knew the law. It's not like he was not Christian, he did not know anything about God. He actually knew the law and he sat on the council.
Yeah.
So he knew these things and he knew God so well, but he still acted against him. Now today, the Bible says that if you find someone who knows God and then they walk away from God, it is very hard to bring that person back to church. But how is it possible that Christ who knew God, Paul who knew God, walked away, was actually brought back? That means there is nothing that is impossible with God.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it shows that he can, in Proverbs it says that the heart of the king is in the hands of God. And how you might have seen different turnarounds in the evidences that are in the Bible of different kings who might have been rather ruthless. An example of Nebuchadnezzar. In the end, after he's cautioned of maybe being proud at a certain point, he makes a complete turnaround after 7 years away from his throne. Now, something is very interesting about the kingdom of Babylon. When Nebuchadnezzar was away for 7 years, the truth is nobody sat on his throne. And the kingdom ran perfectly. When he came back, he just went and sat on the throne and he glorified God. Now, if you are not scared by anything, or if we are not brought to the point of believing that there are mysteries,
And it's that one thing.
this one thing should make us believe that which king? I mean, when you look at the political world of today, let the MP fall sick. People will start campaigning in the background. They're like, oh wow, I think that MP is about to give way. Let us start to solicit for votes. Okay? Even when the MP is still there, 5 years are done and people want to come. But a gentleman is out of his kingdom for 7 years and not even a thought springs in any of the people to go and take his throne. Not his sons, not his grandchildren. Later on we see he has successors. But the kingdom runs without him. Everybody does their work. 7 years after, he's back and he starts giving orders. But a more changed man, extremely not proud but humble. So that also gives us that there are impossibilities to man, but extreme possibilities. Because nobody thought Nebuchadnezzar would be the person that comes back and glorifies God without a fire igniting him, or without him seeing something for him to believe on. Principles of life. I had talked about diet. We could come up and talk about what are the dietary principles that we see in the world today that scientists might be discovering now, but yet the Bible had set precedent for them way back.
Looking at the Bible, in Genesis 1:29,
Yes.
God gives unto Adam and Eve all the fruit-bearing herbs to have that for food. That would be meat to them. And while they fed on that, life was good. Along the way, we see people that come in after the flood, Noah's flood. It says they introduced meat in their meal. And the life of those people that lived after that were not as good as the people that lived in the time before the floods. And now today science comes out and says that, hey, I think flesh is not good for human health. But they come to realize this, not knowing that this was already written off 1,000 years ago in the Bible. And aside not just eating flesh, the Lord or the Bible had already spoken about taking blood and fat. That is in Leviticus chapter 3 and verse 17, where he instructs us that he instructs the Israelites and tells them not to eat blood or fat, for that wouldn't be good for their health. And today the scientists come up and say that when you eat fat, you actually get it clogged in your vessels and then you get cardiac issues and what have you. But God didn't actually tell that you're going to get a heart disease or what have you. He just knew from start that it is wrong for our bodies.
Yeah, no, actually, the principles of dietary was talked about that vegetables were better for humans. Now, not just humans, but even to cats and lions.
Actually, that tells you that for the entire creation was vegetarian. You could look at it in the sense that it is not just healthy to eat someone who is just almost like you, but what do I benefit in something like that? But God had already set a precedent that for anything created, vegetation was only good for them to do eat and take as part of their diet.
Another principle of life that is talked about in the Bible. Now today, we hear about accidents, especially along those main roads, highways, and you discover one of the reasons for some of those major accidents is because drivers slip off. And now today there is a tendency of drivers, especially for those big trucks, to take certain drugs that keep them awake for long. But still, at some point, they just go off.
They zone out.
They just go off. And I discovered that in the Bible talks about when God was making the creation, He created the day and the night. And the day was for working, and the night was for resting. So in natural principles, God set the principle of working and resting. Now today, sometimes we try to break the principle, and we try to work longer than sleeping. But then at the end of the day, even today's science explains that it is unhealthy for someone to sleep less hours. They recommend 6 hours, 7 hours. But anyway, that's a principle that was already set by God.
By God.
I mean, He intentionally put up the night so that you sleep. I mean, so that you rest the brain
and it may not be necessarily for somebody to rest, because God does not need rest. Okay, but you see, from work there needs to be a pause, and you see it in the creation. It's not that God was not able to create everything in one day or at once. Say, let there be everything I need, and then everything shows up. He had, but you see, a setting principle that there should be a time to work, and a time to pull back, okay, and maybe reflect. Because we see God after every piece of work, He reflects and He looks at what He does. Yes.
There's a time
for everything. Exactly.
That means even for sleep, for work, for whatever else.
Exactly.
And back to the principle of diet, when He talked about it in Leviticus 11, He knew that when He was telling Moses that human beings are meant to eat this and they are not meant to eat that, He knew it, though He doesn't usually explain everything. When it comes today, like the foods that the parents feed their kids, like when the kid is born, we start giving them things that are filled with fat, things that are filled with meat. I think we are going to have this statement that says that you're always going to be what you eat. No wonder kids become wild in a way that we don't understand when they're just growing. And he is like 2 years, but he's already fighting a 5-year-old. So it comes out to what it's all an outcome of what we eat. Just because the Bible doesn't explain that don't eat this because this is going to happen, it doesn't mean that it doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't affect.
Just because it doesn't defend what it says, it doesn't remove the principles.
When we are looking at principles of natural life that the Bible talks about. Now, for example, when you look at the yearly cycle, it actually has a physical explanation. I don't know how I'll term that, but it has there is unexplained. I mean, the sun takes that number of days. I mean, the earth rotates around the sun. When you look at a day, it has an astronomical explanation. I mean, the earth takes 24 hours to spin on its axis. But when you look at the weekly cycle, and it has actually existed for years,
for thousands of years,
before the coming up of science. I mean, you wonder, why do we have just a 7-day cycle? Why don't we have continuous days? And then it takes us back right to Genesis, where God creates things in 7 days. So at the end of the day, it is actually God who institutes the 7 days cycle. And we're talking about rest. And we discover that actually during the day, it's basically work time, and then during night, it's resting. But still, you still find that is not enough rest. And when you study the principle of the weekly cycle that God instituted, He instituted a 6 working days, and then a 1 day rest day in the 7 cycle. So you discover that still all these are principles of natural life that we cannot explain how they came up with, but then the Bible talks about them, how they came up. Yeah.
Scientific discoveries have shown that the most successful people, they follow the weekly cycle of work 6 days and rest 1 day. Actually, one prolific gentleman called Jim Rohn, he gave in his talk on how to build principles for success, and he says that use the old principle that the Bible dictates. And he goes ahead and he says that work 6 days and rest 1 day. And the issue is the week has already been stated on, it begins on the first day, it ends on the 7th day. Now, you can never even try to begin the week in the middle of the week and say it is going to go through maybe the original end, and you take it right into the other week. So, for example, you say your week will begin on Wednesday. Definitely your 7th day would be somewhere around the same time, or Tuesday, something like that. But then it will affect you.
When you look at, we saw the scientists at some point, they did their research and they looked at people that rest after, like, it's on the 7th day. They researched and they saw that these people were more happy and more like successful in whatever they were doing because they were following the principle of resting after working. After even the 7 days of stress, 6 days of stress, and then they rest on the 7th day. They realized that these people were way different from these other people that are working all through from Mondays to Sundays, and there's no rest. So that means the principles of God are way.
Those are way, and that takes us to, you've mentioned about people who have discovered the blue zones in the United States, Loma Linda, California. These are people who eat a plant-based diet. They work 6 days and rest 1 day in a week, which is the 7th day. And they are way more happier. They live way much longer lives than other places in the United States.
In addition to all this resting story, science today finds out that the human body needs to rest because they discovered a gland that produces a hormone that makes the human being switch off automatically when that hormone comes out. And so at night, even when you struggle so much to keep awake, that hormone will be released and you will start dozing. But even when God knew that they will automatically sleep because of this hormone, there's one thing He does to make sure that man knows that at this time I'm supposed to sleep. At night, He sets darkness upon the face of the earth. He turns off the lights. Exactly. He switches off the lights. During the day, you have full light. Do whatever you want to do. But at night, dear son, dear daughter, rest.
And the rest of the creation actually understands that. The plants
they just
understand that. The animals understand that, apart from man.
And the principle of waking up early at the same time. I realize animals respect that. They wake up early, I think about 3 or 4 in the morning.
But that happens because they follow the principle of sleeping early. So if you would also follow that, maybe the would be the early birds.
Yeah, true.
In fact, the scientists now prove that it's best to sleep 2 hours
before midnight. And that is something which was really precedented, that someone is supposed to sleep the moment darkness comes. So the Bible has this all pretty much figured out.
You realize if you have tried once in your life to keep awake through the night, during the day you will slumber, you will not be able to do whatever you want to do. You will be too tired to do anything. You'll be too fatigued. That gives you an explanation to why you should have slept in the night and not straight.
And when you mentioned that there is that hormone that is really excreted, I believe it's supposed to be slept away, so it remains in the system.
It's not released during the day.
It's released at night.
It's released at night.
Yeah.
It will take you really long to catch sleep during the day because you're trying to make the hormone be released by force. It doesn't come out naturally during the day. It's attracted to the darkness, so it will come out.
So when you don't use it in the night, you remain with an overdose in the system.
You're going to
and then you knock chairs. Well, which is which is something that happens when we do defy the laws of sleep, and people know that you can only do maybe a maximum of 5 days. A gentleman who has not slept for 45 years in the Asian countries, I think that should be around Thailand there. It is because it's an abnormal condition. He has really never slept. It's a disorder because he lacks a certain hormone. It is not occurrent to everyone. But you realize that the general creation goes to sleep at night and they wake up in the morning. And the more the hours, the better the rest. Marriage is another principle. You see that when people are born and they are looking and contemplating marriage, everybody contemplates, a gentleman contemplates to marry a lady, okay? And that has been going on, and it has been the general course. And you find that it's only such a union that brings out children to be born.
True.
And they continue to exist. Well, today,
It's a reverse.
it is dramatic. You find that men want to marry men, women want to marry women. But when you look at the rest of the animal world,
They're still stuck to the old format.
yes, it is the format. The male with female. And then from there, it continues through successive generations. But today we find that people are fighting for human beings, the highest thinking order of creation, as far as science has proven. The most complex do believe that now man and man, or woman and woman, can actually produce
In creating Adam,
children.
or in creating humans, God puts aside man or Adam, and then after some time he realized it was not good for him to be alone, and so he needed a companion. And that's when he creates someone. But ask yourself, why didn't God create a male? Because it was easy for him to create man, to just pick dust and do whatever. Why didn't he create an animal for this to be a companion to this human being? But how did he think that actually this companion should be female? That it looks like from the very start, God knew that a companion to a man has to be female, a companion to a female has to be man, and by companion I'm speaking about a wife or a husband, not just a friend. And then going further, he instructs that a woman shall leave his father's home and go and dwell and be in the home to stay with the husband or the wife. The husband, yes. That means from the very start, to him, marriage was to be between a woman and a man, and not as we see today. But interestingly, even when humanity understands that there's a lot of problems that have come out of marriage or same-sex marriages, they still go ahead and follow this. But they know very well that with the same-sex marriages, they cannot have children. They can get infections because they do not use the right organs. They do not do things the right way. So they will get infections. They will get all kinds of abnormalities, all kinds of masses there down there. So at the end of the day, they know it is actually wrong. And because they know it's wrong, they actually know the right thing. But they still follow that. What does that put in mind to us? That God, if God desired that same-sex marriages be, he should have done that from the very beginning. But he knew it was only right for man to have woman as a person or a companion, because with that you can have generation of or a multiplication of one. In fact, he instructs them and tells them to go and multiply.
And multiply and fill, yes.
But how are you going to multiply if you are engaging with a person of the same sex with you? It's not possible. And today science has also proven that reproduction or generation of a new being can only happen when a man and a woman do meet. So if they can prove that, then why are they failing to follow what is right? Because they can prove today that the other one is right, that means the Bible in itself is defensive. Because you cannot come up and say that something is right when someone already discovered it or someone already put it aside for you. That means whoever put it aside for you from the very beginning is superior to you and therefore understands what he was doing.
And that shows that there is no human power behind the relation between husband and wife. It is extremely a principle interwoven with humanity, that a man will marry a woman. The effects of perversion, the Bible has even given record of how cities have been wrecked. Now, wrecked because they went away from the right principle. Such kind of associations, male and female, rather female and female, male and male, they pervert the powers of the mind. Now, not just to lose on ordinary things, not just to lose on marriage, but even on ordinary things of life. You know, someone becomes blind to, there is lack of self-respect.
Yeah. And
Yes.
Ecclesiastes 7:29 says that, Lo, this only have I found, that God hath made man upright, but they have sought out many inventions. So, still the Bible talks about that, that man was created upright, but he has sought out many
True,
inventions.
and the same Bible says that man was created simple, but he has made himself complicated. Looking at all this, if you're to realize, when God puts Adam aside and then made Eve, whatever happened to bring them together, we can't explain. But that what happened between them is what happens to us today. And then, when he told Noah to build the ark, he told him to bring in all the animals, whatever animals that were brought in male and female. Why? The few that came in had to multiply so that we have a new generation. So, to God, or from God's writing, whoever needs to generate a new being has to be attracted to a person of the opposite sex.
And you see Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed because the men of that city want to sleep with angels. They did not know that these were angels, but they knew there were strange men who were not part of Sodom and Gomorrah. And even...
As human beings, I think we are meant to be an example to the creations. But even I'm wondering, do these creatures, do they wonder what happened to the human race? Because it was created to show an example to them that I'm supposed to marry a woman because I'm a man. But now I'm marrying a fellow woman, and they're like, okay, because these are human beings, they're supposed to show us what to do, but they're breaking the laws. But they don't break the laws. They don't follow what we are doing. They continue following what.
And
God
I
put
think
them.
humans should also ask themselves what's wrong with these animals. How come they do not divert?
why aren't they
Because
fighting
they-
for their rights?
But then there are rights for you to marry a fellow man. Why aren't the animals doing that?
Why is it a bull chasing a bull?
And you know, today man has become so complicated and wild that man will look out for an animal.
Also, yes.
Yeah.
That's how perversion.
And now, even worse, they will not stop at looking at an animal or a fellow man. They'll actually just go and change their body and make sure they look like female. So that
Yes, we've seen that in the celebrity world.
that is celebrity world.
Yeah, people, it's called transgenderism.
Transgender.
Someone says they are male but they feel like female. Seriously? I don't feel like a lady, trust me. I wouldn't want to feel like one.
How do you even explain how they feel? Like,
Yeah, so
Appreciating nature.
that is what we call, what you see, the perversion of what is already in existence. And like the Ecclesiastes has said, that these are inventions coming up. And there's also someone behind the inventions, because it's just not coming up from nowhere. But still, no matter what men may do, God is not a man that he should lie. So when somebody comes up and says, I am transgender, I am gay, I am lesbian, they are lying.
and more to this,
At the foundation
if
of
you
that.
realize that most of these people who actually get into these same-sex marriages or same-sex behaviors and whatever they do, that are not actually, or they are of African origin, people who are not used to this kind of culture, are doing it because there's someone behind them who is feeding them with something. Most of them are receiving money. But the Bible speaks about money and says that it is the source of all
Evil.
So I think from just knowing that it's a source of evil, man should not even bother to be driven by its.
By that strong desire and attachment to it.
Because with that you go astray in almost everything, starting with marriage.
True indeed. Yes. So now transcending from the principles of life, assuming that we have at least exhausted the few that we had to look at in relation to humanity, we'll look at another aspect of the Bible, which is telling the future. okay, that is something people have longed to look into, the future. What is going to happen to me and you? The Bible gives us an example of a dynasty, Babylon, whose king was Nebuchadnezzar. And one day he dreams a dream. He wakes up, he doesn't remember the dream, but he knows he dreamt. He calls his astrologers, his wise men. He asks them the following questions. I forgot my dream, tell me the dream. Tell me its meaning. And they failed. And there comes a young man. And this young man finally has a source of the dream, and he gives the interpretation thereon. The prophetic aspect of the Bible. Moses, give us an insight into the prophetic aspect, and we look as we also come in and help them out. Yeah.
I like the words that young man uses. Now he says that there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets. And of course, to cut the whole story short, the young man explains to the king. Actually, he tells him the dream, what he dreamed, and then the meaning of the dream. That is Daniel chapter 2 and 3. And in brief, the vision tried to explain the coming kingdoms that were to rule over the earth. And in brief, the vision summarized all the major kingdoms, all the major empires that were to come right from Babylon to Medo-Persia. And of course, history also
coincides with that.
Yeah. And according to the dream, these were the kingdoms that were to come upon earth.
Greece, and then later on Rome.
Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and then the 10 divisions from Rome, which we may say the modern Europe that we have today. Yes. And that was foretold over 3,000 years ago.
And somebody may say that maybe Daniel came up with all those things, but you realize he only lived for only the Babylonians and the Medes and the Persians. And after that, he's not there.
But yet he had a recording of it already.
And that is one of the things that the Bible has as prophetic. Also Cyrus, who later on overthrows Babylon, he is clearly spoken of, and we also see how he overthrows Babylon and how it's all done. And all that thing is recorded by Isaiah and Jeremiah as they speak about Cyrus. When you look about that, God has a way of working as far as prophecy is concerned, and revealing secrets is concerned. The story of the Israelites and the Sumerians and the Assyrians, when they were going to be attacked, and God revealed the plans of the Assyrians to the Israelites, and that was through Elisha, the prophet at the time. And then the king thought there was a spy, and his people told him, there is a God. Those guys have a God. And that is the only reason why we cannot get around them. So you see the different attributes of God, of how God works, or of what the Bible has that no other book has, and thus showing the credibility. I think from there we would look at the prophetic aspect, how Christ is prophesied to be born later on, okay, and how he is born to us and how he comes to us.
Well, you talked about Christ, but now the Bible does not only foretells the birth of Christ or the manner of his birth, but it actually tells the exact time in which he was to be born. And we look at that in Daniel chapter 9, where it talks about the 70 weeks from the rebuilding of Jerusalem. So when you study that prophecy in deep, it actually gives the exact timing of when Christ was to be born and anointed.
It gives his birth, actually his birth, and the same prophecy talks about his ministry, okay, and his death, okay, and after that it also talks about the spreading away of the Israelite inheritance as
Yeah,
far
and
as
this is
critical.
exact time.
And these are exact timings. And the time allotted to the Israelite nation, the 70 weeks, will span over to about maybe 490 years, okay? When someone carefully studies the prophecies with the exact intent. So Isaiah prophesies of Christ and his birth. And his name is actually prophesied way back in the Old Testament. And even way before he is born, dictate is given to Mary when the angel appears. And the express command is given that she will give birth to a son, and he shall be called Emmanuel, or he shall be called Jesus Christ, because he will liberate his people from definitely sin. Yeah, captivity from sin. So that brings us to a point whereby we see in John 1:1, the correlation of the Word, Christ and the Word becoming flesh and dwelling among us. How we see this happening and what it means to us according to the inspiration or the credibility of the Bible.
Looking at John 1:1, the Bible says that in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. In verse 2, he says that Word was in the beginning.
Actually
verse
says,
3, he actually speaks about that Word created everything, and nothing was created that was not created by him.
Yes.
Then when you come down to verse 14, he says,
And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, and the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. 5 and 6 will go ahead to say, and the light shineth in the darkness. In verse 4 it says, in him was life, and the life was the light of men.
And that light was shining in darkness. And the
darkness comprehended it not, in verse 5.
In verse 6, he comes and talks about that light being the life for men. But then keep in mind that in John 17:17, the same Bible says that sanctify these people, sanctify them by your
word. The word is truth.
That means through the word we get sanctified. But the word that is spoken of in John 1:14 is the one that became flesh and dwelt amongst us. And from the beginning we've been speaking about the incarnation of Jesus Christ. And we come to realize that this word that is being spoken of is the same as Christ. In John 14 verse 6, Christ says that I am the way, the truth, and the life. That means in him is everything. And so in him on him rather must we depend. And that very Bible writes and talks about the word being the same that created the world. And when we look at what the world believes today, in as much as they don't believe in creation, but even those who tend to believe in it, believe it was all done by God. But the Bible proves that actually creation was by
Jesus Christ, yes.
So he was there from the very beginning. The Word was with God. And the Word dwelt amongst
men.
us. And we all know the old story that someone came by incarnation or was born by a virgin and came and dwelt amongst us, and these people denied him, and what have you. So to me, it's only proof, or the Bible is trying to explain itself, that when I say that the Word, I'm referring to Jesus Christ.
Yeah, actually, the word clearly shows that nothing was made without, and it says here, and all things were made by him. So meaning the word we look at here is given a gender attachment. It ceases to be just mere words. It means it is somebody that we are dealing with. And in verse 14, the word was made flesh and dwelt among us. So there is only one being in the universe that ever had such a mysterious appearance. But this is none other than Jesus Christ. And that gives us the understanding that all creation was done by him, through him. Nothing was made that was not made by him and for him. Actually, the Bible does give highlight on that. Yes, Moses?
Yeah, in his teachings, and
Bible?
well, maybe so that one of the Bible teachings, of course we are talking about the prophecies. Now there is one mystery that the Bible talks about. Now, for example, as we saw the origin of man or origin of life, now at the same time the Bible talks about the end of the world. And in his teachings, Christ dwelt so much on that subject. And of course, I'm specifically looking at Christ's second coming. Now that is a mystery, really, the way the Bible describes it. I mean, it has never happened. And really, we cannot explain it as we say that there are many mysteries in the Bible we cannot explain. But in Matthew 24, Christ gives us some of the signs that were to come before his coming, or that were to make us sure that actually what he talked about or what he taught was real. And one of the signs that he talks about was the darkening of the sun, the moon turning red, the falling of the stars, and the shaking of the powers of the earth. Well, that sounded a bit unnatural, but actually all these signs came to fulfillment.
True.
And by the mere fact that these came to fulfillment, we have surety that actually we shall see his second coming. Now, for example, the darkening of the sun took place on the day May 19 in the year 1780. When you read history, actually, I discovered that there was a mysterious phenomenon where this mysteriously the sun got dark at about midday, and the falling of the stars. And when you read history, on the date November 13th in the year 1833, we had what we call the Great Meteorological Shower, where in the biggest parts of Europe, we had a falling of the stars throughout the night. And remember, those are one of the signs of the times that Christ talked about they are to come before his second coming. He talked about the darkening of the sun, the falling of the stars, and the shaking of the power of the heavens. And around that same time, we had what they came to call as the earthquake of Lisbon. And that is the greatest earthquake that has ever been recorded in the history of the earth. And it's one earthquake that took place and almost cut across all the parts of the earth. And all the signs actually came in the very order that Christ had foretold them.
And actually, you see that from here you find the theories. For example, the falling of the stars is where you find humanity has built weird theories about extraterrestrial life based on whatever fell ever since that time. And governments have built facilities and trying to study all these things and saying life from outer space came in that time. But as we clearly look at the Word of God, and when you read in 2 Timothy 3:16, it says that all Scripture is given by the inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness. And 17 says that the man of God may be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto all good works. What we have been discussing today, or what we have been really talking about, shows that there is a right way of doing things, a proper way of doing things, and a wrong way of doing things. Actually, God is just trying to put this right. And this defends what we read earlier in the beginning, that God is not man that he should lie. When God says that marry a woman, he is not lying. He means it. And there's a reason why the Bible has that specific part recorded. There's a reason why it has Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed, because they did not go according to that principle. God knows that if men do not follow that, the world would come fast to an end, because minds would be perverted, everything goes to darkness. And correction, bring us back on track and path. And Peter defends it later on in 2 Peter 1:21. It says that, for the prophecy came not in old time by the will of man, but holy men of God spake as they were moved by the Holy Ghost. Okay, so this gives us the background of the author and the writer. The author and the writers. Where does all this word come from? And the accuracy. Peter says it does not come by the will of men. People do not sit down and say, I think, let me write 2 Peter.
Even if they did,
it wouldn't be
those
as...
things explain
Exactly. It wouldn't be overlapping and so accurate. When Moses was writing Genesis, he did not go out and say, let me write Genesis all of a sudden. All of them were inspired. They were moved, actually, by the Holy Ghost. And for the purpose which we find in Timothy. And it blends right in. Paul and Paul's letter to Timothy and Peter in his counsel, he blends right in with Paul as to the purpose of the scriptures and their very much origin. So thank you so much to our dear viewer. Whom would you rather believe? An author that has put his reputation on the line and has given all full evidence, backing himself up over a span of years? And would you rather believe someone that has come up with fables? But I would recommend that we do believe an author, one that has used instruments who are already in existence, an author that has used men to bring to their very own light, for their very own benefit, words of correction, words of reproof, words of hope and a better future for not just you and me, but for the entire human race at large. And we do concur, as Peter has given to us today, that holy men that did right were moved by the Holy Spirit of God. May God bless you.